Are you sick of counting calories, feeling deprived, and then binging? I will show you how to be thin for life without needing more willpower. I will show you how to get out of this cycle by developing a thin woman's mind, and then the body follows. The change is permanent, and being thin becomes just who you are. That is where the magic happens, because then it is effortless. I'm ready. Are you? Hello, friends. Today, I'm going to dive right in. I've been thinking a lot about this idea of using past success to then sabotage yourself as you're on your journey to becoming naturally thin. As you start to see yourself as someone that is naturally thin, I think about it as the difference between losing weight and being naturally thin effortlessly for life, that there's such a big difference. And so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what is that difference in a way that I can explain to all of you so that you can start experiencing that for yourself. Because I've done it both ways. I've done losing weight, kind of what I think about as the traditional way, in sort of a diet fashion and kind of control and willpower and self-discipline and all the things. And I've also lost weight completely effortlessly. And the latter is just so much more fun. And I think one of the big things that gets in the way of being naturally thin and having it be easy and effortless is this idea of success sabotage. And it comes in two forms, primarily, that I see over and over again. The first is using past diet success against yourself now. And the second is using success that you've had in other areas of your life and unknowingly sabotaging your journey to become naturally thin effortlessly. And so I'm going to talk about the past diet success first. And here's kind of what it looks like. It looks like something like this. You kind of tell yourself, I'll release the reins when I lose 10 more pounds, 20 more pounds, fill in the blank, whatever it is. I'll release the reins when I get to my goal. It will be easy to maintain. This is actually a good one. It's easier to maintain than it is to lose. Also, not necessarily true, but you kind of start to tell yourself, well, once I get there. You might tell yourself things like, well, I really like counting calories, because then in the back of your mind, you're like, I get to count them all, and then I get to save them all up for the evening, and then I get to kind of have my little eating enjoyment time. You might be telling yourself, well, I really need to have a short eating window, which then oftentimes I see might be followed by a binge, whether it's in the evening or on the weekend or sporadically. Or you might be like, well, I just really need to count all of my food. Kind of count what it weighs, count the calories, count all the things. That's how I make sure I don't put weight back on. If I just had someone controlling all of my food for me, then I could lose weight. If you find yourself telling yourself that, this is for sure something you struggle with. And I used to get dogs and animals and be like, it must be so nice for them. Someone just gives them the exact amount of food they need, and then they eat it. And they're not thinking about food all the time. They just eat it when they eat it, and they're done. And yeah, they smell food and they want food, but they just can't have it. It would be so much easier. I literally used to think this about myself. It would just be so much easier if I could have someone controlling my food for me like an animal. So then, lo and behold, I tried to control my food and it just didn't work. If you find yourself using any form of willpower or more self-control or discipline, or kind of telling yourself that's the answer. If I just had more willpower, if I could just control myself more. And all it really comes down to is you're telling yourself, well, I can't trust myself and my body, so I need something outside of me to control my food. So those are all symptoms of what I see when you're using your past diet success against yourself. And one more thing you can do is ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, 10 being for sure, how possible do you think it is for you to be naturally thin and have it feel effortless right now, today? Not once you lose the weight, but right now in this moment. And why or why not? And just be curious and understand what you're thinking about that. And here is why it isn't working when you're thinking any of those things and when you're using your past diet success as you try to become naturally thin effortlessly. And first of all, I want to say it's totally normal, right? If you've had success in the past, that's your brain's kind of default answer to losing weight now. You ask yourself, well, how do I lose weight? And your brain will just go to all of the times you've tried before, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and it will use that information to inform your decision right now. But as I said in the beginning, there is such a big difference between losing weight and becoming naturally thin for life. One feels like it needs a lot of control and willpower, and the other is just easy and it becomes a part of you. And so using how you've lost weight before to lose weight in a new way and to become naturally thin, it won't serve you. And how you've gotten there, or how you think you've gotten there in the past, also isn't how you stay there. Like, really think about that. How you might lose weight probably isn't how you want to stay there, but I want to teach you how to lose weight in the same way that you stay there. And that is how you stay there easily. Not only do you enjoy the process while you're losing all the weight, but you never fear the weight coming back on because the process was enjoyable and because it's so easy and sustainable, and you retrain your brain all along the way so that by the time you get to your goal weight, it's like, of course. I have clients that will tell me 20 pounds before they ever even reach their goal. Like, I don't even know how much more we really need to work on this, because they're like, I feel like it's just already done. Now it's just a matter of time. I think about it, it's a little bit like the difference between me making 6 figures in a corporate job is completely different than how I make 6 figures as an entrepreneur. Same money, same results, but how I get there is totally different. And so I want you to open your kind of mind up to reframing how you lose weight and how you become naturally thin for life. They are actually different. And when you're using your past diet success, now how it shows up as sabotaging yourself is you're actually fueling your desire for food. And then you're trying to combat it with willpower. So it's like, on the one hand, you're actually increasing your desire. You're having more and more and more desire for food. And then the only kind of answer you allow yourself to use is more willpower. So then it's like you're trying to combat more desire and you need more willpower every time, and it becomes exhausting. As you try to control and restrict and count and use anything outside of you, it's kind of like trying to squeeze a balloon tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Eventually, it will pop. And for those of you who are really good at control and willpower, the pop may not necessarily be putting on 30 pounds. Maybe it's binging and then you follow it up with a restriction cycle. Maybe it's putting on 5 pounds. Maybe it's avoiding the scale for a while. Maybe it just feels like a tightening around your life instead. It might start to feel harder and harder and harder to control what you eat, and harder and harder and harder to lose the weight, and harder and harder and harder to keep it off. And so you're just trying to control it more and more and more and more. So whether or not you put on 30, 50 pounds, or it just feels harder and harder and harder, it might be a different symptom, but it's the same problem. And the reason that desire is fueled over and over and over again, I'll talk about a little bit in the second part of this, when you're using success in other areas of your life to sabotage becoming naturally thin, that as you think about the food, as you kind of meticulously plan and count and do all of the things in whatever way you're trying to lose weight, you're thinking about it all of the time, right? And the problem is you have an over desire for food because you're thinking about it all of the time. So then you use thinking about food as the solution, but it doesn't work that way. So here's what you do instead. Rather than focusing on how you've lost weight in the past, I want you to just consider, what if you completely let all of that go and you started on a fresh, clean slate? And all you focus on instead are these 3 things. Desiring only the food that serves you. You are deciding. You decide what food serves you by asking yourself some of the questions that I walk you through in an earlier episode. I think it's number 34. Food that serves you is the title. So desiring only the food that serves you, processing your emotions productively, and actually identifying as a naturally thin woman. Ready? Today. Not 6 months from now, not once I fill in the blank, ... do something in the future, but right now, today. I promise you it is always one of these 3 steps, and that is how it becomes easy and effortless and just a part of you and no longer something you're actively trying to do or actively trying to manage. And now I see this come up in the other kind of way is when you are sabotaging becoming naturally thin by using a success or other areas of your life that you're successful in against yourself on this journey. So it might look like telling yourself, kind of having this mental conversation of, listen, I used to tell myself like, listen, Laura, I'm really successful in my job. I'm really successful in this area of my life. What is wrong with me? Why can't I lose weight? It shouldn't be this difficult. I'm so successful in my job. Maybe as an entrepreneur, in my marriage, as a mother, as a friend, as a contributor to my community. It's like you look at all of these areas of your life and you think, well, like, what the heck? Why can't I lose weight and keep it off? It shouldn't be that hard. You just eat less and exercise more, right? Well, no. First of all, that's not only not the answer, but what's happening is you're actually using the success you have against yourself as you're becoming naturally thin. And so, like, you might be then telling yourself, like, my brain is so quick and intelligent. I can get more done than anyone around me. Why can't I figure this out? And I used to also look at other people and be like, listen, if she can do it, and I had a multitude of examples. I'm like, if she could do it, look at what she can do. Like, and I kind of would have some judgment sometimes of like, if she can do it and she like can't do these other things that I can do, I should be able to do it. But here's why it doesn't work. When you're telling yourself, I should be able to, because either it's just eat less and exercise more, which I kind of talked about earlier, or because I'm so successful in these other areas of my life, I should be able to lose weight. It shouldn't be that difficult. But again, I want you to like really remember there's a difference between losing weight and being naturally thin and having it be effortless. They are not the same thing. I will give you this example of when I used to work at a Fortune 500 technology company. So I was leading a project for the company implementing a new lease accounting standard. I know you all are probably thrilled and can't wait to hear about all of the details. It was thrilling. Actually, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm kind of a super nerd, and I asked to lead the project for the company. And so led a team of people. We had to get new software. We had to understand the currents, the kind of lease portfolio, work with all of these groups. It was about, I'm trying to think if it was quite 2 years. It was about an 18-month project. And so I was leading it, and it was a new standard. And so there was a lot of learning I had to do myself and then lead other people with the learning. And because it was new, there were a lot of resources we could use from some other firms and some other places, but the implementation of it was unique. And there was a lot of open-ended questions, and there was a lot of kind of learning and applying and evaluating, and there was just a lot that was unknown. And so I was thinking about when I was trying to solve for a lot of kind of the obstacles we encountered, it was a decent amount of kind of up and down at times, and we had a lot of problems. And how I problem solve is my brain just like goes and goes and goes. And then it's like, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And could we do this? And could we do this? And what about this? And so my mind just all of the time would be trying to solve for the problem, right? And I know many of you can relate, especially when you think about problems at work or other problems, and I use problems in air quotes, in your life that you're trying to solve for. And I would even think at times, like when I would get up from where I was sitting and I would go to the bathroom, or when I would be driving home, or right before bed, or when I was at home and we had put Ben down, like my best thinking often happened at that time because my brain was just constantly trying to problem solve. And then when I would kind of give it a little bit of space, it would be like, oh, we could try this, or we could try this. And it would start to come up with solutions. But I use this as an example because how my brain was problem solving is that it was just like thinking and thinking and thinking over and over and over again. I would tell it, For example, we were using a couple of contractors at the time that were helping us go through the lease contracts, and we were starting to put some of the information into a software program. And there was one of the contractors was just absolute shit. I mean, didn't know what he was talking about, blatantly didn't understand the standard. Like, a lot of these software companies were really struggling to have enough people because all these companies had a tight timeline and they were all doing this at the same time. And so the availability of resources and people that really had a thorough understanding and knowledge was quite scarce, or it seemed quite scarce. So anyways, we had these contractors and I was like, what? Like, this is just going terribly. They don't know what they're doing, all of these things. And so my brain would just be like, how can we solve for this? 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 And then as it thought about all of the ways, it then came up with a bunch of different solutions. We could use our own people. We could hire interns. I could teach some people. I could do some of the contracts. We could get new contractors. We could complain to the current company and get someone else new in here. We could ask other companies what they're doing. Are they using contractors? Are they doing it themselves? What other teams in the company have some capacity? Like, I came up with all of these ideas. But the way I came up with all of those ideas is because I told my brain there was a problem and it just started to solve for it. Now, when you use that same way of problem solving to try to quote unquote solve for losing weight, it doesn't work. Because what happens is you increase your desire for food. Think about why you have an over desire for food. It's because you think about food too much. And so you're trying to solve for that by thinking about food even more. What? So your brain thinks, look, I'm really good at these other areas of my life. There's a problem. And here's how I try to solve for it. And then you try to use that same way of quote unquote problem solving as you try to become naturally thin. And you find yourself thinking about food even more because you've told your brain there's a problem. And so it's trying to solve for it. But here's the kicker. A naturally thin woman doesn't even think about food. What? Like, let that just sink in for a minute. A naturally thin woman, she likes food. She enjoys food. She has desire for food when she's hungry, but that's kind of it. And so you're trying to solve for an over desire for food with obsessive thoughts and more thoughts. It's not going to work. And so it's just adding fuel to the fire. And this is why it feels harder and harder and harder. And this is why I think often those of us that have a lot of success, let's say in a corporate career or in making money or in some area of our life where we kind of look at ourselves and we're like, this is bizarre. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I am so successful here. Why can't I be successful in losing weight? And this is a big part of it. Because you are so successful in those other areas, then it makes it harder for you to lose weight because you're using that same skill set, but it doesn't work in the same way as you're trying to use it right now. Because you're trying to problem solve and your solution that you're kind of trying to wrap your brain around is some form of control or deprivation or restriction. And then I will have women that come to me and they're like, listen, I must be because I'm in my 40s. Like, it must be hormones. I don't know what else it could be. It's getting harder and harder as the years go on. And now maybe, but most of the time it's not their hormones. And so I'm like, let's put hormones aside for a minute. And now that can play a part in it. But I want to table that for a second and just think about this, that it's actually more often than not a compounding effect of trying to solve for the problem with the wrong approach. And it's been compounding for years, if not decades. So then you think about, you're trying to solve this over desire for food with more desire for food because you're desiring the food more and more and more. The more you try to control it, the more you diet, the more you try to restrict, the more you tell yourself, I just need more control, the more you think about it. And so all that happens is then it feels harder and harder and harder every time. And so then I'll have women be like, listen, it must be my hormones. but I've helped many women in their 40s and beyond, and it isn't actually the hormones. Now, their hormones may come back down and we will work on some of that regulation, but so much of it is because they're trying to problem solve from the wrong approach. So rather than telling yourself, how do I solve this problem? How do I solve this problem? And then having the answer be any form of restriction or deprivation or self-control, tell yourself, first and foremost, there just isn't actually a problem. And then when you're focusing on the solution, always direct your brain to one of these three areas. Desiring the food that serves you. Again, I think that's episode 34. Processing your emotions productively and identifying as a naturally thin woman. It's always one of those three things. Every single time that you aren't losing the weight and it isn't effortless and you aren't in the body that you really want to be in, come back to desiring the food that serves you, processing your emotions productively, and identifying as a naturally thin woman, and you will always find the solution. And you can ask yourself, if I was naturally thin right now today, what would I be thinking and feeling? What would she be doing? She is not obsessing about food. She is not thinking about the next diet. She is not making the scale make or break her day. She is not turning to food every time she feels uncomfortable. She is not using food to transition between activities and tasks. She doesn't use food in that way. So to become naturally thin, which to me is not the same as just losing weight, but to become naturally thin and have it be easy and effortless, you have to start practicing that today. And how you do that is through those three steps. Mastering these three steps is all it takes, I promise. It is simple and it will become effortless. If you are ready for help, you know where to find me. There'll be a link in the outro. I hope you all have an amazing day, my friends. Friends, there are only 3 steps to become naturally thin for life. Desiring only the food that serves you, processing your emotions productively, and identifying as a naturally thin woman. In my private coaching program, we work one-on-one together, and I will show you how to master each of these so that it becomes completely effortless. If you are interested in learning more about working with me, head on over to lauradixoncoaching.com, click on the Work With Me tab, and you can schedule a consultation there.